Hey, what's going on there, folks? Welcome back here to a Sunday, 12:54 p.m. That's California time. February 16th, 2025 is the date. Latest earthquake activity here on the globe shows a 1.2 across the area of Texas, out there in the Permian Basin region. A lot of liquid gold out there in the oil fields, and also earthquakes, if you really think about it. All right, far as let's go ahead and check out California here real quick, see what we got going on the USGS map. Looks like they are making some improvements here on their map, although it's not back to normal. Still limited in terms of the options of map data here, but hey, it will work. We're using it what it's designed for, and that's to see where some of these earthquakes are taking place here in the last 24 hours. A couple earthquakes here across Northern California. The latest at 2.5, 9 miles deep here into the southern end of the Cascadia mega thrust area. This region here has been seeing a lot of tremor activity out here. Downstream here of the elevated activity upstream. So if you think about it, the tremor, show you guys a tremor here from yesterday. This is about 100 epicenters of tremor, mainly southern end here, Northern California. This is the slippage, so to speak, slow slip events there into the subduction zone of the Cascadia. When this takes place, strain builds upstream across the plate boundary, the subduction zone there, and that's what's been taking place out here. One earthquake upstream from the tremor, 15 miles deep here into the Cascadia from yesterday. So far today, 3 of them. 3 earthquakes. Well, that's in the last 24 hours, excuse me. After midnight, a 2.5. So still watching this area. It seems to be on the brink of potentially having a partial rupture out here. Any tremor activity that we see happening downstream triggers earthquake activity almost immediately upstream here, indicating a pressurized, almost a maximum pressurization here across the southern end. All right, the rest of California, a couple smaller quakes here in the Coast Range, out in the Mendocino National Forest area. Really nothing big. Those earthquakes today, these are surface fractures, very shallow earthquake activity. That could be a key indicator of some strain out here, right? You look for these little fractures that happen away from the plate boundary. Also north here, a little swarm around Santa Rosa area. This is a little interesting movement. A couple 1s and some 2s out there in the last 24 hours. Not associated with the Clear Lake volcanic field, which sits up here. Those are geothermal earthquakes. A lot of geothermal plants out here, and the operations themselves induce earthquakes. There's a whole process involved. And this here is very normal. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not. I've been studying these things for years down here. I even went down there in person to investigate the facilities down there. They didn't let me in their secured gates, but they did offer me a tour. I never did go back down there, so I'm going to have to do that here soon. Last 30 days, this is very common. 1,500 earthquakes in this area of the geothermal fields. No geysers. They call it the geysers, but believe it or not, there are actually no geysers up here whatsoever. They just call it the geysers for some reason, but there is none. There's no geyser activity. Just a lot of earthquake activity resulting from those geothermal operations. Down across the Bay Area, where we've had a number of earthquakes here on the Hayward Fault. In fact, a swarm here in the last couple days. If we look at the last 7 days, there's a bunch of 3s and 2s. I'm sure there's some 1s in there as well that have not shown up on the map, but got about, how many earthquakes we got for total tally? 9 earthquakes. And that's a lot of movement if you really think about it on a fault system that's well overdue. The Hayward Fault here has one of the greatest percentages of possibilities of seeing a large earthquake in the near-term future compared to the San Andreas Fault here. The last big earthquake was 1906 there on the San Andreas Fault. But this one here is a very dangerous and feared fault system as it runs through the East Bay. Highly populated density here, and if an upper 6, low grade 7 ruptures on there, we're talking about massive, large-scale disaster type activity out there. And it does have potential to rupture with other fault systems upstream here, the Rogers Creek Fault, and potentially the southern end here of the Calaveras Fault, where the Hayward Fault branches off of. So if you take that into consideration and the built-up strain, that could easily result in the length here of an 8.0 earthquake. A lot of people always feared about, the San Andreas Fault producing an 8-pointer. Oh, and it can. But you got to account for, ruptures on the fault systems here that may be linked or could potentially rupture into the next fault system upstream here. So it's a little scary, but we got to be prepared, folks. We're living in some times here of elevated seismic events, and they're all pointing to bigger events happening here near term. I know everyone, I've seen a couple comments here recently, earthquakes happen every day. Well, that's my job. I'm here to report earthquakes. And when I see earthquakes swarming and elevated earthquake activity on these fault systems that are well overdue, guess what? I'm going to report on them. What do we got so far today? 3 earthquakes, mainly down south here. That's on the Kilauea fault, little 0.9 off of that. But it's been generally active out here. The Hayward fault, even some up north. So we'll just keep an eye on it, folks. That's all we can do. It's been more elevated here in near term than it has been in quite a while. Also some strain down here off the San Andreas Fault inland on the west side here of the San Joaquin Valley. That there's a fault system that runs here just on the eastern side of these hills, western side of the valley. That is indicative strain there off of the San Andreas Fault. Looks like it's around the just off of the Parkfield section here. This area is overdue for a 6-pointer. Well, it's coming up for a 6-pointer. Average intervals run about 20 to 22 years on average for a 6.0 earthquake. Our last one on the Parkfield segment, 2004. Here we are, 2025, 21 years, right? That's getting close. And not to mention, that could trigger a rupture down here across the plate boundary. It does have potential. Any earthquake activity within that striking zone, the triggering zone, so to speak, could rupture the San Andreas Fault, which is capable of an 8.1. And that's 300 and something years since the big one there at the southern end. All right, today on the San Andreas Fault, a couple more earthquakes here directly on the San Andreas Fault. Now, this is, I can't say this is normal because I don't recall the last time we've seen a swarm here on the San Andreas Fault, the southern segment here. It doesn't happen. Periodically, we'll see earthquakes close to it or opposite off of the plate boundary, maybe one or two really close, but this is directly on the San Andreas Fault. You can't get much more on it than what's taken place with this earthquake swarm. And that's coming up on about 34 earthquakes of various magnitudes, including a number of 3s. So as you can see there, we had 3 3-pointers in the last 24 or in the last week. In the last day, we've had a number of them, but after midnight, a 1.1 and a 1.4, the latest quake. So this is still something to watch here. These could very well be foreshocks to something much bigger. I can't stress it enough. We just don't see that all that often on the plate boundary like that. The San Andreas Fault having some swarms. They occur down here across the Brawley seismic zone, very close to the San Andreas Fault, but this thing is under a lot of strain, folks. The San Andreas Fault will rupture soon. How soon? That's anyone's guess, but I look for these little signs here. You have to pay attention to little signs and signals, just like anything else in life, right? Plate tectonics, no different. These could very well be foreshocks. We'll see what happens. A number of smaller quakes out there around the Southern California region. Only a 3.5 and a 2.7 there in the last 24 hours on the San Andreas Fault. Again, that 2.7 right there in the mix of swarming on the San Andreas Fault there. Further down south, got a little swarm on the San Jacinto Fault zone. These are very small earthquakes on that zone, but this is more typical. Seeing a little bit of earthquake activity on the San Jacinto Fault zone is more typical. As I've been watching these for many years here, we always see earthquake activity here on the San Jacinto Fault zone, and that shows as well. Look at all that clustering going on. But the San Andreas Fault, not so much. That's a little odd, a little rare to see activity like that on it. We'll continue to keep an eye on it, folks. Further out and about here, Yellowstone National Park. Nothing showing up here on the seismograph stations, but let's double check the recorded seismographs here. I do see a couple very small ones. Very small. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5. But those are super small. So small that they're barely showing up on nearby seismograph stations. It looks like this one did right here. But aside from that, folks, Yellowstone National Park is the last thing to worry about right now. Texas oil fields getting hit. Got a little a little activity stirring up around Falls City, Texas. They haven't fixed east of the Rockies yet. When you zoom in, it goes blank. Over here across the West Coast, you zoom in, and it looks normal how it's supposed to. So they're working on it. But a little bit of activity out there in the oil fields today of Texas. Nothing else going on there across the eastern portion of the country. If we look at the last 24 hours, largest magnitude here is going to be a 5.2, the Kuril Islands. That's the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. Overdue, I feel, as well for a mega quake. A lot bigger than some of these earthquakes we've been seeing there across that region. It can easily produce big mega quakes. And it's been a while. That's the largest here prior to midnight. After midnight here, we have a 5.1 back here across the Iran area. Far as the Santorini region, let's go ahead and go check this out real quick. See if we can see what's shaking. A little earthquake right now within the last 10 minutes or so. There at the Santorini area. That's going to be, looks like right in that swarm region. For a 2, is that going to be a 2.3? That looks a lot bigger than a 2.3. I'm guessing that's going to be this one right here, 4.4. That happened at 2056, which was, that would be just within the last 10 minutes or so. So that would match up with that earthquake, it's gone now, but right here. 4.4 earthquake. And again, that's within the mix of earthquake activity. 1,102 events here in the last week. Numbers are going down. But it's still staying roughly somewhat consistent here with earthquakes happening, every 5-10 minutes or so. Let's go check out the seismograph stations here from the Santorini, Greece area, where there's the 4.4. It looks like that is the largest here in the last 24 hours. Still earthquake activity, including those little ones here. I don't see any signs of magma movement, like we had seen here a few days back, where it was a consistent, solid reading of about 2 hours of noise happening down below this area, which is a key indicator of fluid movement. I don't see it yet. It's possible it may have broke through somewhere down below, and it has come to another pressurization point where we're just seeing earthquake activity. This is not over yet, folks. This is not hasn't halted. I still think this is in developing stage. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that volcano area out in the Santorini region, the Colombo volcano. A lot of seamounts out there. Pretty good cluster going on here. Look at this mess of earthquakes in the Fiji and the Tonga area. Goodness. The majority of these here, pretty deep earthquakes, although we're getting I can only say one shallow adjustment here across the just south of Port Vila, Vanuatu region, southeast of the Loyalty Islands region. But look back here, a bunch of deep earthquakes, very visible here on the Earthquake 3D globe as well, in a massive cluster. That should very well amplify the conditions here across this plate boundary. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of the action from these deeper quakes with that shallow adjustment indicating strain here. That is the general region where I don't know where my other one went to, but it's normally a plate tectonic map that shows the general strain and the transfer of pressure out here along the plate boundaries. But watch this area around Papua New Guinea eastward. It's got to be building up quite a bit of strain with this deeper activity. New Zealand, a couple threes down there, really nothing big. Got some more fives out there around the Philippines. That region has been jumping with earthquakes here recently. Nothing big, but just a bunch of earthquake activity in a swarm fashion around the Philippines. Let's see, Alaska activity from yesterday. A little new activity up north here, it looks like. Some twos and threes happening well north of the or yesterday's event. That was a 4.2 down here. But look up north here. Little newer activity following that movement. So definitely get some adjustment going on up here on occasion. We just don't see it all that often. But it's happening up there right now. Let's see. There's the Iran earthquake. Still swarming out there around the Greece, Santorini area. The Atlantic Ocean, pretty quiet aside from a couple smaller quakes. South America area, 5-pointer down here at the southern end of the Peru-Chile Trench. Nothing big. Threes and fours, very typical out here on any given day across that major subduction zone. 4.9 right now into the Middle America Trench. There in the red flag. Looks like about 35 kilometers deep there within the last half an hour. Aside from that, we'll continue to keep an eye on things. Excuse me. Hawaii should be getting close here to having another eruption, episode number 10. We're going up. Here's the pause here back on the 12th. Since then, we've been going up, and that's been the story. That's been the persistent rinse and repeat cycle out here for Kilauea Volcano. As I said last night, we may see the eruption resume tonight or possibly early Monday morning. We're getting into that time period here where the pressurization is probably at the maximum before we see fountaining going on again. The good thing is when you have events like this, you can almost predict when the next eruption is going to happen. So you could actually take a flight out there to Hawaii and get all prepared and set up to see the eruption take place. I would love that. These are almost predictable. But I got commitments here, and I don't have any way to get out there right now. So, yeah, within the next 24 hours or so, we'll see that return to an eruption stage. Let's check out space weather activity or lack thereof. I know we've had a little bit of aurora activity last night, kicking up around the G1 class storm. That was due to some high-speed solar wind stream that's been flowing to the planet from a couple different coronal holes here recently. That has since died off. And really not calling for anything major there in the forecast in terms of the auroras. We might see a little bit of off and on weak activity, but really nothing of any significance. As far as the flaring threat goes, I wish I had some better news to report here, but things are quite boring out here in terms of solar flare activity. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of complex sunspots out here. Got a newer active area back here on the southeastern limb of the sun, but really not all that concerned with that region. These folks are forecasting a 10% chance for an X flare. My forecast calls for 1% or less. Not really seeing anything that would define a 10% possibility. 45% chance is pretty decent there for an M flare. And more than likely, M flare activity is going to come off of the sunspot region on the southeastern limb right down here. As far as any close approach asteroids here, let's go ahead and check this out. I know we got kind of a big one coming in 2032. We'll discuss that more at a complete update video in the future. And by the way, I am working on the member drawing here today, folks. We're probably going to have it here. Got sunshine out right now in California, so don't have to worry about any rain. I like to do my updates outside. Kids are sick inside here, so it's better to do it outside. So yeah, this afternoon, within the next couple hours, just stay tuned. We'll do a live member drawing. I'm giving away, picking out 2 people this time. So if you're not in the member drawing, jump on board. You still have a couple hours to do it. And again, I'm picking out 2 people, so that doubles your chances there of being picked as a winner to win cash prizes. Look at that. 850 feet. If that one was getting close to us, Wow, that one that's coming in 2032, or 2024, YR4 is the asteroid name, is up to 300 feet in diameter. Well, this one's triple almost. Something like that would, wow, that would be quite damaging. But luckily, we're 4 million miles away from it at closest approach. All other ones there fairly safe as well. Looking at the severe weather department here for convection activity, not a whole lot. Overnight, we picked up some more rain here in California. That is scooting off and out. A cold air coming in down from Canada across the majority of the country here. Similar pattern to back in January where we had high pressure out in the west. That goes way up, brings the jet stream and cold air down. Snow for Oklahoma and Kansas, maybe Texas. We'll have to see how far south that stretches down. But Pacific Northwest, another cold system, wet system for early midweek. After that, man, I don't know. It's a ways out there. I don't see any promising storms out here for the West Coast. So we could still use a little bit more rain out here. I know we've gotten a lot all at once, but March is supposed to be a fairly wet month for us as well here along the West Coast. All right, let's see what else is there, folks. I'd like to point out these earthquakes that are happening out in Southern California due to one reason and one reason only, and that is to be prepared just in case things do get nasty out here in terms of larger scale potential. Last year we had more 4-pointers out here throughout California at any time since the mid 80s, and then there was a little break. But now we're starting to see things kick back up in terms of swarming on the San Andreas Fault, swarming on the Elsinore Fault, which is pretty common. But, it's been way more active out here in the last week or so than I can recall in terms of compared to, times in the past. Except for, in 2024 where it looked very similar, especially Northern California. And down there across the San Andreas Fault where, significant swarms taking place. 32 earthquakes, regardless if you go back the last 30 days or the last 7. Like I say, it's quite rare to see a swarm right there on that San Andreas Fault, that segment. More so down here across the Brawley seismic zone and extensional boundary, kind of a spreading center down here, but that in itself has my eyes peeled and watching closely. So just stay safe out there, folks. I know earthquakes happen all the time, but we're overdue for some big ones. And to be complacent in that department will make someone become a statistic, and you don't want to become just a number. So I got to be prepared for something bigger out here with this elevated activity. Wow, look at this quake. That is an odd one. Off of the plate boundary. That's a little strange. 4.6 Micronesia area. That we don't normally see a lot of earthquake activity out there. Historical data. Looks like there was one earthquake out there. I don't know when. It looks like maybe a 5.0 to 6.0. Since 1900 to 2015, but it's not all that common. So that's rather interesting there to see that development. Where there is common earthquake activity, obviously there along the plate boundaries. So, all right, folks, have a good day. We'll catch you guys back out here for the afternoon member drawing here in a couple hours. Give me a couple hours here. We're still writing some names down. Get in on the member drawing. We're picking out 2 winners today. Your choice of prizes. If you want a $50 Visa MasterCard electronically, physical card, we'll get it to you. After verification, we have to verify that you're the legit person that's being picked out of the bowl. Or if you want an Earthmaster t-shirt, that's also an option as well. I'll try to remember to wear one so you guys can see it. Or a geology mining kit. It's a 12-piece geology mining kit for rock hounds like me, and I'm sure quite a few other folks out here that like to go up in the mountains and maybe chisel for some rocks and whatnot. That's pretty cool. So we'll see you guys out here in a couple hours for the member drawing. Have a good one.